One thing. All right, welcome everyone. We are live. This is Meet the Masters with, is this 2 in a row? I got my co-host.
First ever 2 in a row.
That's right. So Aaron and Tim Watson here, joined today by Master Darryl Hurd. Hello, sir. How are you?
Good, good.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you being flexible. I had you originally scheduled for 2 today, and then I had my first substitute teaching gig today.
Well, it's a good thing for that, but my schedule is always fairly flexible, especially now without traveling much. So.
Yeah, so I was going to lead with that. I know typically you do a lot of traveling. Are you doing a lot of Zoom calls?
Yeah, calls, a lot of emails, customers, a lot of them are calling me now instead of their sales reps, just because a lot of my communication out to them by way of like blast emails. So, and it's just a difficult time with material shortages, labor shortages, things like that. So even though last year, when you think it was so slow with COVID, we were extremely busy trying to just keep up with demand that was out there.
Can you remind me, is it fencing that you work in, the fencing?
Yeah. Our company manufactures aluminum fence. So I'm the sales manager. So I typically take care of all the salespeople and then travel quite a bit to see key accounts.
Yeah. So I guess a lot of people were sprucing up the backyard and
yeah. I mean, anything having to do with remodeling, anything like that, fences, it could be twice as much volume as last year.
Wow. And yeah, like you said, we've been looking at some renovations and stuff, and the prices are just a little higher than they used to be.
Yes. So if anybody wants to remodel their studios, they may want to wait till the price of wood comes down.
Yeah, it's astronomical. I couldn't believe the quotes we were getting.
Yeah. I mean, some of the pressure treated is literally twice the price as it was at the beginning of last year.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So have you been able to get in the dojang a little more regularly because of that?
For the last, at first, when Master Godwin first opened, I was sporadically getting to see some of my grandchildren, and like my one daughter, not Stephanie, Heather, was very adamant about not being out in public too much and things like that. And at that time, I mean, we really didn't know what was going on. So I didn't start back, but I've probably been back now for 3 months on a regular basis. So
yeah. So for those of you who don't know, actually all 3 of us come from Master Godwin schools, the Korean Martial Arts Institute, and Mr. Hurd's been at the main studio for how long at this point?
I started there in '93.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been a while.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. Almost 30 years.
Yeah.
A couple people are saying hello. Zabari Richardson says hi. We got Natalie and Lindsay from Great Britain.
Mm-hmm.
They're joining us. It's getting a little later there, so thank you for joining us, ladies. If anyone has any questions for Mr. Hurd, feel free to ask. So we kind of segued into, you got started in 1993 at Master Godwin Studio.
Right.
What was the impetus to get started in the martial arts just in general?
Bruce Lee. I mean, I grew up at the time of Bruce Lee. We saw Fist of Fury when it came out. A couple of years later, Enter the Dragon came out, and this will really put it in a time frame. We watched it in the drive-in theater. So that really got us into it. Me and my brother, we went out and bought nunchucks. I mean, I was about 13, 14 years old at the time. So that started it. And then I had some opportunities as I went along to train at other places. Okay. So high school happened, one of our shop teachers was studying Taekwondo. So I started taking after school semi classes with him for a while. So graduated, went to Penn State. At the time, I don't think Master K was there. So we're talking 80 to 83 kind of time frame. But there was now Master Del Rio, and he had a club and doing Mudokwan. So I trained with him for, I guess, what would be equivalent of about a year and a half. So it was a good group up there. I mean, I can imagine that Master K went in there as well. And I do know some of his people, and it was a good club up there at Penn State. So then it really fast to graduating, us having Stephanie, finding a house, getting a full-time job, everything else. So there was quite a, hectic time period in between college and settling down. So the first house we bought was in Aston, Pennsylvania. So about a block and a half down from where we lived was Amcor Karate. A lot of people in Southeast PA in that area know of them quite a bit. At one point, they had quite a few studios. So I trained with Master Scott. So that was back in the day when you hit harder, you had to take more punches, you got yelled at more. So it was a little different than the way we kind of have to market things today. And in a lot of ways, we do have to market the martial arts that we're teaching. And so, but it was good training. It was great training there. Then about 1978, we moved to, not 78, about 1987, we moved to Delaware. So came down here, okay. I wanted to start martial arts again. I hurt my back, which was no fun. So for about a year, I had to recuperate. When I got done recuperating, the first thing the doctor told me is I got to strengthen my core. So strengthening the core, the first thing I thought is I got back into martial arts. So at the shopping center where the supermarket was, there was a Kempo studio. Tried that. It's great because it developed hand speed and accuracy, but they didn't kick a lot. And I really like to kick. After, especially with Master Scott, we like to kick. So did that, saw a demo for Kung Fu. So I studied Kung Fu for a year too. And it was nice. It's just a different kind of training. But like I took away from there the circular motion, the sticky hands type techniques, which I found like in a lot of our self-defenses, keeping contact when you're doing the self-defenses, things like that, or even when sparring, when working close in with somebody. I've realized I've probably gotten that from there, a couple of years of doing that. So, and Stephanie had said, well, for those who don't know, Stephanie Mobrook is my daughter. So Muhammad's my son-in-law. So back in the day, it used to be, she was referred to as my daughter. Nowadays, I'm referred to as her father. So it's kind of switched the way things have been now. So I ended up doing a little Kung Fu and then ended up with Master Godwin. At that time, we were in Newport, Delaware, down the road from where the Stanton studio is now. Mr. Literal was teaching, great guy teaching and whatnot. He left after a while and it was different. We trained on either carpet on concrete or wood. So had nice big calluses at that time. And then of course we moved to Stanton, and Stanton, we got nice thick mats.
That's right.
So that helped a lot.
I remember the days of carpet.
I'll be right back.
So
Okay.
I got a couple people are chiming in. Dennis Teefee, he trains at Impact. He says Sun Valley High School alumni and friends with the Scott family.
Okay. I'm not going to say what we call the people from Sun Valley. He probably knows what I'm talking about. So
Master Four, we were just actually talking to you. So Master Four from the Seychelles says, greeting from the Seychelles.
Oh.
So
he needs to invite me there, and I have to figure out a way to get there.
Mr. Hurd is a avid fisherman, and he was just talking about some trips he's looked at to your area, sir. So we might have to connect and make that happen.
Yeah, in a week I'll be in Mexico fly fishing. So definitely any place I can go, I'll go.
That's right. Maybe we just talk about that real quick. I think probably before I met you, I knew that your license plate on the back of your car said fly fish.
Yeah.
So what we talked about the martial arts. How did you get into fishing, and specifically fly fishing?
Yeah, like I see people I haven't seen in a long time. Like I talk about two passions: three passions. I'm sorry. I'll get in trouble for this one if I don't. Family, of course, martial arts, and fly fishing. But when I grew up with my stepfather. He was an avid fly fisherman. I was out on Ridley Creek fly fishing at 13 years old. So, I mean, went to Penn State. Right there is great fly fishing. Met a very renowned fly fisherman there. So, as well as taking Mutaquan, I was getting out on the streams fly fishing as well. So, and it's just expanded from there. So,
you make your own flies too, right?
oh yeah. Yeah, I've built a couple of rods, big flies. Luckily, my wife is very nice. So oftentimes she will ask, if we go here, can you go fishing? I said, yes, I can go fishing there. And she, okay, this is a good destination. So she does take care of me. I'll say that it's not always just a fishing vacation or just a family vacation. She allows me to get away a little bit too.
Oh, that's very nice of her.
Yeah.
So you talked about that start in Newport, and I never went to that studio, but looking at that little shopping center and knowing that Master Godwin came from Philadelphia, and then of all the places to start a martial arts school, Newport, Delaware.
Yeah,
it's kind of wild because it was just this little rinky-dink shopping center, and then
yeah. I mean, it wasn't where there was going to be a lot of foot traffic in there. But we were successful. So I guess a lot of it at that time, of course, is word of mouth, and then of course promotions. Doing things at schools and things like that. Especially trying to get the kids in. We definitely did not have as many kids at that time. We were more on the teenagers, much bigger adult classes at that time. So the mix was definitely different than it is now.
I've heard Master Kaluzny talked about every once in a while, Master Gordon would come down and teach class. Mm-hmm. Did you ever have any special guest instructors from like the outside of Master Godwin's studio?
Oh, yeah. Trying to think of who would have came in. Master Khan, I think Master Khan came in before. Quite a few from outside of the association. Okay, of course, Dojin M. Jihanjae has been there quite a lot. Dr. Hyung Kim was there and taught quite a class when we opened up Kennett Square.
That's right.
A couple of masters that I don't think I've ever known their names. All I knew is they taught sword and they taught some other things to us, and we kind of had to have translation in between. So that was very interesting because these gentlemen were from Korea that were there. And I'm pretty sure, to tell you the truth, after so many years and so many things, it's kind of hard to try to keep track of who's come through,
right,
where we've been. I've traveled and trained at other studios a lot, so sometimes that's blending in as well. So.
Yeah, well, it may put you on the spot and maybe talk about, so you mentioned you're traveling through work, and I've heard many stories of you going all over the place for training. I know that you got to train a lot with Phil Geiter, and
yep.
I don't know if you met him through tournaments or training, but
yeah, we met. You know what? A lot of the guys that I became really good friends with over the years, we competed together. And when I started, I was just into the senior division. So a bunch of us were in that 35 to 40 range and older. So Master Geiter, Master Soon, Master Harsh,
Jim Brenner,
Master Fernandez. I mean, all these different people that we were, and we kept in touch. And of course, there's always the attrition that happens. So some of the people aren't around anymore that I knew well. But I mean, it was great because there was a lot of camaraderie. I mean, it was fun sparring with all these guys. So every once in a while you get a little heckled from the guys on the side, but that was all part of it and we enjoyed it. So it was really a great group, competing with those guys and everything.
What drew you to competing? Did you compete first or did the kids compete first?
And I competed first.
Okay.
Well, I actually competed when I was in college a little bit. We did a couple of tournaments, but I started probably 2 years later. Heather started, my younger daughter. She did it, and I think we were into it for probably 6, 9 months. Stephanie was too busy with other sports. She finally came on board, but I think she was a little rankled because Heather tended to be a belt rank ahead of her most of the time. So, but they started going to tournaments with me, Heather first, and then Stephanie. These are my cute little girls. They love to fight.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, the way we fought at the studio, we sometimes got in trouble at tournaments. If you're in the studio fighting Stephanie, you try to tell when she's about ready to do a spinning back fist, because if you didn't, you better get out of the way because you get hit.
Erin shared that story.
Oh yeah.
I'm
And that's
kidding.
great too, because when they got together between the tournaments, that was Stephanie's number one competition, of course, was Erin. So those two were always at it together at the tournaments.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun, especially when we were Fernwood. The whole family would go up. We got a townhouse. All kinds of people would come over. So it was a very social event too when we went to tournaments.
Well, yeah. Even outside of that, I remember. I guess maybe it would have been the tournaments. Whether it was at the tournament or at black belt camp, you were always the guy. You know, black belt camp, you had the grill out.
Yeah. Me and Larry Pierce. We always brought plenty of food.
Yeah, got the food out, and then you were like the headquarters for the after tournament festivities.
Yeah. Well, with all my traveling, I've always like gone into town. First thing I do is where am I going to eat, afterwards. So we went into Elizabethtown, started looking around, and TJ Rockwell's maybe is the place.
Yeah.
And over the years, seen that go from like a bunch of stuff on the ground with picnic tables to huge decks nowadays that they have. But it was always fun because we'd have tons of people. The first time we went, we probably had about 40 people between Master Godwin's studio and Master Vaughn's studio. And I just happened to sit next to the both of them, listening to stories of them telling from years ago.
Yeah. So I just assumed that most regions always had a black belt camp, but I don't think that all of them do. So, at least in Region 8, and I know some other regions will have a clinic, a black belt clinic, where you get there on a Friday, you have lectures, you train on a Saturday, and you train Sunday morning and go home. Yep. And so, on Saturday night, you have the opportunity to go out and in town and hang out and, like you said, just congregate and socialize. And it's one of the best parts of the martial arts because it's just fun to connect that way.
Yeah. And I've had the chance to go to a lot of tournaments, camps down in like Region 21. And I've taught at one of their camps. And like with testing, they normally combine a gut clinic with their testing. So because they're so spread out, like Region 8, it's easy for us. I mean, nobody's more than 4, maybe 5 hours away to anything. But down there, you got to take a flight. A lot of the people do. So if they're going to have it in Orlando, those from Atlanta, that's quite a distance to go. So, but the people down there were fantastic. Of course, Steph and Mo lived down there for quite a while. So it was great. I could go down there on business, stay with them. There's even times I stayed a week there to watch the kids while they went on vacation. So, but very welcoming. Region 21's fantastic. The Sants, we trained with them at Rock Solid a bunch of times. Of course, exposed to Master Hutchinson a lot. So that was fun. He told me I was a member of Region 21 so that I should move down there so Steph and Mo would stay. Yeah, because it was always, in the back burner, knowing that eventually Steph would move back north from there.
Right.
So he tried to keep her as long as possible.
Yeah. Well, they got him for a good while. It's like 8 or 9 years, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's nice to see that region grow from when they first got down there until some of the last times I went down with them. So it's really a great region. A lot of really good people down there. So, and again, that's one of the great things. I mean, I tell class sometimes, you go someplace, there may be a World Tuxedo studio nearby. And I'll tell you what, as long as you do take care of protocol with talking to the master or having your master speak to them, you can pretty much go train anywhere. So it's great. And of course, for me traveling, I've done that quite a bit.
Right.
Uh,
Have you visited any studios internationally?
no. When I heard Stephanie was going to Aruba, I was thinking, man, I really would like to go to Aruba, but no, I haven't had a chance to do it internationally. I haven't traveled between Belize and the Caribbean. It has been my primary vacation traveling. So, and half the time it's been at fishing locations.
Right.
So,
Well, if you make it, Aruba's a great, like it's just a nice, it's awesome. We love Aruba.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's right. You were there too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're planning a trip for this year too, so I'm pretty excited about it.
Oh, good.
What was I gonna say? So this is something we can certainly talk about now. You talked about going down to Region 21 and teaching. So what did you teach down there? I know the answer, but
Well, it was a mix. I mean, when I taught at one of their camps, Master Jansa had come in. He was the guest master at that particular camp, and he was teaching Hapkido, which was great. And people down there knew I did a lot of knife work. So I taught like 5 sessions in one day of knife skills, and then had a chance to go and train with Master Jansa as well. And I'd met Master Jansa a year or two before when I was out in Chicago, and went studio out there as well. So, but then other times when I'm out there, I was kind of doing advanced self-defense, which was a combination of what we do and Hapkido kind of mixed together.
yeah, kind of the KMAI style.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what got you motivated to research the knife and train with the knife as extensive as you have?
Well, I mean, I grew up at a time when kids had knives. I mean, my grandfather, I was born in Texas. My grandfather gave me a pocket knife when I was about 6 years old. Okay. Had it. I mean, there was no big deal of having a small pocket knife in your pocket going to school. I mean, you weren't doing anything with it other than, whittling wood. So I had a certain amount of knives going up, and then working in the martial arts, of course, learned the knife form, and then went to the black belt camp, and Master K taught the breakout with knife skills. And I'm like, I like this. And I even went back for a second one later in the day. So I was in his class twice because he said later on he was going to teach slightly different stuff. So I hooked up with him. He told me about the Warriors Path group and the Silk and Steel they do. So myself and Master Rob Kloss drove out to Pittsburgh, went to a weekend of knife training, Silk and Steel. So the silk part was Master Homechek with flexible weapons, as well as knives. Him and I have sparred a lot with knives together. And Master K, of course, teaching knife skills. So I went out, I don't even know how many times after that, but quite a few times. One time we specialized in Bowie knives. So a different type of long distance kind of knife fighting and sparring with the cross helmets on. So you can stab to the face with these large rubber knives. So different type of training, different type of intensity. Because of doing that, I learned to make my own trainers. So I had the tools. I'm kind of the handyman around the family trying to fix things. So I started making my own knife trainers, and then kind of went from there.
How many knives do you think you've made at this point?
I've given quite a few away, so it's kind of hard to keep track. Probably 25, 30 knives. And I mean, the vast majority of them, of course, are aluminum trainers. Right. But that's actually a knife I made, a real knife I made.
Yeah, Beautiful.
So making the handles and everything else. So some of my trainers do have, I would call real knife handles on them
Right.
rather than cord wrap. But some of my basic trainers are simply paracord wrapped. So they're basically made to be beat up during seminars and things like that.
Awesome. Now, I remember one of the years for creativity, they got you to make some katanas.
Yeah.
Some actual swords out of the aluminum. And there's some of them are still floating around. They're out there in the KMAI
Yeah.
universe.
Years ago, I got Jeff's Master Settianto's sword and had to refinish it because it had so many dents in it, especially from him and Master Priest fighting with the swords during the creativity demos. And I had to pretty much re-sand the entire edge back down because there's so many divots in it and cracks and everything from fighting. But that was interesting. That was the first time I tried to do that. It basically was making a big knife.
Yeah.
It just took a lot longer to do. But I also fitted the pommels on there and did a little more intricate cord wrap on the handles, things like that. So it was fun doing. But I ended up I got one sitting over there that's not finished. I had the blank cut and everything else, but I haven't gotten around to finishing it for myself. So,
How long does a project like that take?
typically I'm doing it like a little bit here, a little bit there. But I mean, for a nice knife or for like a sword like that, it could be 12 hours of work. Because just trying to do the handle scabs and then the setting them up and gluing them and pinning them and everything else is involved. It's a lot more time consuming. My basic blanks, I can knock out a couple of training knives in about 2 hours, 3 hours at the most. So it's a matter of cutting the aluminum and then just sanding off the edges. And I use a belt sander, so that helps.
Right. It's funny. I talked about substituting today, and what they were talking about today was the rise of industrialism and how the people that were craftsmen for spent 30 years making shoes, and all of a sudden they were out of jobs.
Yeah.
So there's still something to be said for a handmade tool or weapon or trainer, over something mass produced.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And of course, over the last several years, they've had the Force and Fire series on, where they have different knifesmiths coming in.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it's amazing watching what they do. And especially since one of the judges is Doug Marcada. And he's a Filipino expert with his knife skills. I've been on his website quite a bit. And he primarily uses karambit. So a different type of knife, different type of fighting and defense with it. So I've been trying to do a little more with that, and got some trainers of my own, and then trying to see eventually I could kind of put together a program with that.
Yeah, that would be great. I've loved the times I've had you or taken one of your classes. So if anyone's out there watching and is interested in this stuff, I wouldn't say find him on Facebook, but I can shoot him I can shoot his email to you and get in touch with.
Definitely. Matter of fact, Master Guider, I gotta still set that date with him. So, because he had asked me a couple of weeks ago
Awesome.
to come up there and start and do a nice seminar again.
I need to catch up. Yeah, we've been talking about trying to get up with him too.
Yeah, great people up there. Of course, him and I, we've spent time outside the studio quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
So.
Saucon Valley, the students are amazing there, and he's an all right guy himself as well.
Yeah.
You talked about Region 21. Brian Ormiston from Region 21 said hello. He walked in and he said some nice things about Muhammad and Stephanie last week. So the knife thing is fascinating to me, but let's talk about it's funny, in 30 minutes so far we haven't talked about like Grandmaster Shen. So one of the things that doing those parties at the Region 8 after parties, like hanging out with all the masters, Were there any times where Grandmaster Shin showed up to those?
One time he stopped and said hi. Okay, we were there. I think at that time, probably Master Robinson, Master Mamitis, Master Godwin, and I can't remember the masters from Connecticut that came down. I think they were there too. And Grandmaster Shin just came in and said hi. So in some ways, on some of the weekends, we might have tried to avoid exposure with Grandmaster Shin just in case. So, but
Do you remember the first time you got a chance to meet him or interact with him?
Yeah, it was at the tournament. Okay. The great thing about being in Region 8 was that was where headquarters was for the longest time. I mean, Stephanie and Aaron got to train at headquarters when they were in college together. And Grandmaster Shin would come down to our studio in Stanton sometimes. We'd have him down there, and we also have him at our banquets. But especially at the tournaments, you see him very approachable, everything else. Probably my best story with Grandmaster Shin. I was invited to the Master's Clinic, filled out the paperwork, everything ready to go. My mother got really sick. And I went to Master Godwin and said, I don't think I'm going to be able to go after all. He said, well, you need to go see Grandmaster Shin and ask him. And at that time, I'm like, okay. And he was still up at headquarters in Philly. So I called the office, made an appointment with him, went in and sat down with him. And again, he's the Grandmaster of our association and all he's done. But when you sit with him, he's so very approachable, so very understanding. He said, number one is family, take care of family and things like that. So it was an experience, a little disconcerting going in there at first. Okay, because of course I've only seen him in other environments. So, and then of course, I'm not sure when you started doing leadership class, if we were still doing them in Lancaster.
No,
the last class of the
by
year.
the time I got in, they were in Master Ball's studio in Audubon.
Okay, yeah, when we were in Lancaster, the last class of each year, Grandmaster Shin would teach. So that was probably, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years maybe that I remember him teaching that. The first time he came to class, he had us kicking real high, and trying to impress things, I kicked a little too high and kicked myself right off my feet. He comes over, looks down at me, he says, Darryl, you okay? And I'm looking up at him, I say, yes, sir. Got back up again. So, but it was great having him teach class, a full class, at leadership like that.
Yeah, the ego's bruised, but the body's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's, doing those classes, you wanted to push and because there were so many people around you that were just awesome martial artists. And
oh yeah.
You didn't want to feel like you were getting left behind, left in the dust.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of pushed it a little farther than maybe your skills could take you at times. So it was fun.
I tell students all the time, it's like, if you don't fall every once in a while trying to kick high, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Okay.
of course, it was great because Grandmaster Shin, all of our camps, the kids camp, the adult black belt camp, he was always there. He'd all of a sudden kind of show up behind you while you're working at the camp and whatnot. So it was interesting having him there all the time.
I know you've had the opportunity to do a lot of coordination with the youth camp in Region 8. You talk about some of the opportunities, like you said, get to see Grandmaster Shin and some of the experiences you've had with that.
Yeah, I was basically voluntold by Grandmaster Shin that I was going to help out with the counselors. So we were at Saginaw quite a few years before it was remodeled, because right now it's very, very nice. It wasn't like that before.
Right.
And we're having a meeting, and he kind of looks over, Mr. Hurd, we need you to take care of the counselors. And I'm like, yes, sir. And that started quite a long time ago. So I helped Master Godwin. The hardest was when we had to have so many background checks and getting enough people to be able to cover the number of students we used to have. I mean, we split our kids camps and we still have 250 students in our weekend camp. So at times it kind of was like herding cats, but it always worked out. They were safe, very few injuries. So, of course, now things have changed with COVID.
I was always amazed at the fact that you'd have so many kids at a stay away camp doing karate and basketball, baseball, swimming, very little to no major accidents.
Yeah. I mean, like my part was kind of making sure we had counselors spread out in the right places. It wasn't there for really a social thing for the counselors in the sense everybody hanging out together, because we needed to keep an eye on all those kids. I mean, ranged from, I don't know, I guess about 18 years old to 16 years old back then. So quite a diverse group of kids. So
you mentioned your kids, and I know that your wife has helped as a nurse at the camps for many years.
Yeah, she gets a little overwhelmed sometimes. Luckily, Master Skimbit, them and oh God, she's going to kill me because I can't remember her name. I'll remember it in a minute. Would help, and they would oftentimes do the check-in together because.
Talking about Violet.
Violet, yes. Sorry about that. Sorry, Violet. But doing the check-in, because the amount of medications these kids have is practically overwhelming, and they've all got to be organized and everything else and given out. So Master Skimba, Violet, my wife, that was their job majority of the weekend. And sorry about that. I forgot to put my phone on airplane mode. So, but it all worked out. What little bit of injuries that we had, probably the worst was a twisted knee where they had to go and be taken to the hospital to be checked out, and not even an ambulance. Their parents came, picked her up. So she was in Master Anastasianto's class at the time. So sorry, Anna, I'm throwing you under the bus there.
Well, that's good. After 20 plus years of camp, one is not bad.
Right.
It's one to mention. You talked about the kids training, but your wife actually got her black belt. Her and I got our black belts the same. I still remember we promoted together for first.
Oh, that's right. You were in the promotion together, which means I have some pictures of you there together.
It's probably, you're probably right.
Yeah. It was interesting how we got her to join. For so many years, she sat there. We did our forms. We did our one steps. She pretty much knew the basic forms already. My son, Derek, he got up to Chodimbo. He just couldn't stay focused in class. And he didn't want to be there after a while. We made him stay an extra month. Didn't want to be there. And my excuse was, well, we have a contract, so why don't you take over his contract? I didn't tell her that Master Godwin would have let us out of it, of course. So got her in, got her started. She actually did very well with it. And she was extremely excited when she got her black belt. We have some pictures of her jumping in the air at the time. The great thing about that too is a few years later, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And the rehabilitation afterwards and everything, the doctor was really impressed at how quickly she recovered. And it was because of she told him it's several years of martial arts training. She had a strong core, and that really had an impact on the way she recovered and came back after the surgeries. So not only was it with the family, but even with her long-term health, it was really an impact on that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did they when she got her belt, did you tie it on?
No, I didn't tie it on then. So, but I did. It was nice. I did get to tie on Stephanie's.
Yeah, for her fourth degree, right?
Yep. Yeah, we were down in Florida, and it was their tournament. That's right. So I was judging in their tournament, and they started to put the presentation together. And Master Hutchinson came up to me and said, "Would you like to put her belt on?" And I'm looking at him like, I'm looking at my belt going, well, I'm not a master, but I would love to. So I was able to put it on her. It was great. My wife was down there too. And so very nice time. And of course, Region 21 being so kind down there, they let me do it. So it was a very nice experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And really like a once, once in a lifetime, like you're one of very
Yeah.
few guys to have had that opportunity outside of, Grandmaster Shan, Grandmaster Bodwin, like those high ranking non-members. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. It really was pretty neat. And of course, there's video of it and a lot of pictures.
Yeah,
floating out there, so.
I saw the picture going through your Facebook trying to find a picture. I saw that. I was like, man, I vaguely remembered it, but seeing the picture is like, that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. We were going through pictures last year, and it's like, oh, I forgot that happened. And I forgot that happened. And when was this? So after so many years, a lot of it tends to kind of blur together with all the different things that we've done and places we've gone. So, but it's like, again, it's been a great experience.
Yeah, sure. I've heard that doing these interviews helps jog those memories. Like, no, man, I forgot that happened. That's pretty cool. So
Yeah, as you know, I sent you some notes because just trying to remember like the history of when I did martial arts. I'm like scratching my head going, okay, I know I did that, but when was it?
right.
So I kind of pretty had to go back and figure out some dates, like when I was training in Penn State and things like that, because I could not just pull them off my head real quick at the time.
Well, that's great. I actually didn't know that you trained at AMCOR. So that's a cool piece of information I didn't know. I know that in was it the 90s, they had the Delaware Valley Korean Karate League. Did you participate in that?
I went to it, but I didn't compete.
Okay.
That one. So it was really neat. Not too long after that, when I got down with Master Godwin, I remember them having the Masters tournament up at the old Core States building, which is now Lincoln Financial. No.
Or whatever, Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo Center, yeah. And it was an interesting tournament because it was all masters competing.
Wow.
So I watched Master Godwin compete. And what they did is then they grouped the Chinese Kung Fu martial arts, the Japanese martial arts, and then the Korean martial arts, so that they had team sparring with those three groups. So it was interesting to see all the styles. The Japanese weapons, so much different than some of the stuff we did. One gentleman using an oar, a boat oar, that's the weapon he did his form with. So it was really interesting. And the fact that, hey, I'm watching my master compete. He did what we have as Bong 6, shattered his Bong on the floor when he came down and smacked it, picked it up and just kept doing the form with the Bong being rather flimsy. So it was quite a thing to see them all together there.
I can imagine a lot of masters in the region that would love to partake in that tournament.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. But it was a little before your time, though.
Yeah, I've heard Master Godwin, when I talked to him, he shared stories about that and fighting in the boxing ring up in Madison Square Garden, and
yeah,
ninjas throwing smoke bombs and jumping in after him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he starts telling stories back when the whole idea of sparring, first, very limited padding. Not until they came out with really the padded martial arts type gloves. A lot of that was bare hand. So, and maybe you'd have gloves on, but it's barefoot. So it was taking a lot of beating. So it's a lot different than what we do now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was reading today, I have the book, The 20th Century Warriors. I don't know if you've ever seen that. This is the one that in Black Belt Magazine that Grandmaster Shin was in. And they talked about the karate, like free sparring is still a fairly new thing, like, in the past, like 120 years or so.
Right.
So even now it's pretty rudimentary. You know, we got foam dip gear.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And actually, I got the magazine on my bookshelf.
What's that?
I have that magazine on my bookshelf too.
Oh, do you? Awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a few magazines I've kept. The one with Master Godwin on the cover, and some other ones that I knew people in. So,
Yeah, it's still pretty cool. Like, you know, Master Gawain obviously had a bunch of copies of that. It was at Taekwondo Times.
Yeah.
But it's still cool to be like, man, he was on the cover of that. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. It's like I go someplace else. Hey, I know this guy.
That's right.
He teaches me.
Awesome. Yeah, Brian Ormison said he remembers the Stephanie's promotion. He's like, I got to meet you and I sat down and we had lunch.
Yeah.
We were eating lunch during the tournament. And then Master Sharp says Kung Su, and he says higher consciousness through harder contact.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's those days you talked about back in Newport. I've heard stories of those guys and the hard sparring that would happen.
I remember me sparring as I was either red belt or Choden Bo and sparring George Maybroda.
Yeah.
And it's like you learn to protect your ribs. And you get kicked and you kind of fly against the wall and you go back in and you do it again. And it's how you learn to protect yourself.
That's right.
Yeah.
I still probably one of the first times, one of the first only times we sparred. I remember you were very like you had that defensive stance, like back.
That came from Master Godwin.
That's the way Heather spars too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So the one of my most memorable tournaments back in the day, Heather had just turned 17 like 2 days before the Region 8 tournament. Okay, which put her in the adult division. Stephanie, of course, had been competing. It ended up, and we did all the black belt sparring on Friday night. So it's probably 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And the only bout left is first and second place for the women's black belt division. And it ended up being Stephanie and Heather sparring together. And it's the end of the night. Anybody that was left gathered around. Master Godwin's in there going, just let him fight, let him fight. And Heather asked my wife if she should bow out. And then Stephanie asked me, it's like, should she take it easy on her or what? We were both like, no, just fight. Especially since it looked like Stephanie, if she got first place, would probably win grand champion that year. So Heather was concerned about that. I was like, no, just fight. So you got Heather fighting defensively like that. You have Stephanie fighting offensively. And I think they ended up finishing in a draw and had to go into sudden death finally. And Stephanie did win and went on from there. So, but just seeing them together like that was amazing at that tournament.
That's our goal for our kids someday.
I'm sure that was nerve-wracking as a
dad. Yeah. Well, me, I'm like, go at it. This is gonna be fun. My wife's like, oh my God, I can't watch. They're gonna like kill each other or something. So
we've been through black belt testing, and that's a little stressful. I can't imagine the two of them testing or fighting against each other.
Yeah.
It'll happen at some point, I'm sure.
It actually went and happened, and I wasn't home. I was traveling on business, and they started going at it, and my wife stepped in the middle, and she ended up getting pushed, and both of them were like, "Oh my God, oh my God!" But to tell you the truth, I thought my wife was going to get up and kick their butts.
Right? Yeah.
Really.
Exactly.
So that put an end to that real fast. So, but in general, they get along pretty good.
Yeah.
So,
well, they're adults. They're not teens at this point.
No.
Master Sharp says he referees his kids at home and the winner gets dessert.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would not go. That would be bad in our family.
Uh-huh.
They would throw down if that was the prize. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember the tournaments where Master Valentin used to come down a lot with his students and his sons and daughters and spar. And I remember one time sitting on the side, and he had sat down, and I didn't actually realize who it was. And one of his girls are fighting either Heather or Stephanie. I couldn't remember which one it is. And I'm like, oh, come on, that's not a point. Because his student I turned over, and it's Master Valentin, and he looks at me and said, "That looked pretty close." And we started talking and about everything. And that group up there is fantastic too, Region 9. I've been up there quite a few times. Very, very receptive, very kind, nice people up there. So I think you've actually gone up there too, I believe.
Yeah, Aaron has.
Yeah.
That's actually a good segue. I was going to ask about that as far as, did you get a chance to ever train with Grandmaster Bowden up there?
No, just timing wise. Sometimes I would figure out I'm going there the week before. So Master Godwin give me the go ahead. I call Master Valentin, contact him. And especially after the first time I was up, he's like, "Yeah, come on up." So sometimes my timing was great because they would have an instructor meeting that night. So I basically covered the floor with the adults. And he liked me teaching Hapkido because it was different. And then they ended up having actually some seminars with Master Godwin up there later on. So they were they wanted to learn as much as they could, which was great with those guys. So, and just seeing them at like world tournaments, at other tournaments and things, you go in and they like, you just saw them the other day.
Right.
They're so nice. Yeah.
So you talked about Hapkido. I'm assuming you've trained that as long as you have the Tong Sudo, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, when we started, we didn't realize we were also learning Hapkido. I mean, we had no idea that our self-defenses were based more on Hapkido. They were slightly different than the associations. Grandmaster Shin had allowed Master Godwin to do a slightly different set. And a lot of that was based on Hapkido. So for probably the first 3 years, I probably didn't even realize I was learning Hapkido. And then we started doing specific seminars, and especially when Dojin would come in. Dojin Jihanje, I mean, he's the originator of Sumo Hapkido. It's kind of like having Wan Ki run a class. I mean, he's the guy that started that part of Hapkido. So, and of course, watching the old Bruce Lee movies, he was in Game of Death with Bruce Lee. So, but I mean, unbelievable, the knowledge. And one thing you always did, especially if you were one of the bigger guys in class, is you tried not to make eye contact because you end up being the uke, the one he demonstrates on. And when he demonstrates, he does it pretty hard. So I've finished quite a few of those with very sore wrists, sore neck, some other things, but it never went too far. So, but I mean, that type of training has pretty much been integrated into everything I do with the martial arts. So it's kind of nice because it segues with Tang Sudo, it segues with my knife training so much more. I found that my self-defense, and a lot of our students too, because I watch students when they're testing our black belts, they'll automatically take someone down without even thinking about it after doing a technique. And they're pretty proficient with wrist locks, arm bars, things like that. And then also just in the knife work, the knife self-defenses I learned from Master K, and then doing the Hapkido, I went back years later and I realized my knife defense was kind of his as well as Hapkido. It was kind of went to a different level with that. So, I mean, anybody who's thought about training in that, it's just very, very good mix with what we do. I mean, Master Jansa obviously is a grandmaster, I believe, with Hapkido as well. And then some of the other people, Master Booth in Australia, and some of the other masters we've met over the years, very advanced with that, especially Master McKenzie, of course, in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the knife again, and I just want to touch base because we obviously have it in our higher, we have a knife form. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I always tell students is a knife and a sword, you can't use your karate on the knife and the sword. It just doesn't, it's not that type of weapon, right? You can't force a blade through something. Mm-hmm. So if you could give some advice on someone who wants to start being more comfortable with a blade, whether it's a knife or a sword, Could you give some suggestions or maybe a
Well,
book
especially
or
with a knife, the key thing is manipulation. Because even in the form, you have to change grips several times within the form. I tell students, get a butter knife and sit there and just do the transitions in your hands. And with Master K, there was actually I believe it was a 16, fit the number of steps. I'd have to count them out right now. Drill, just to make it used to being able to manipulate the knife different ways. And got to the point where I could do it left-handed too, and then be able to do both at once. Doing left-handed really helped because teaching the knife seminar, that manipulation drill is rather difficult to teach if you're not mirroring somebody with it. Okay, so and then from there, even when I teach the knife skills at the end of class, I always emphasize that you don't need to have a knife to use these skills. A pen, a roll of paper, many things can be used with a lot of the same techniques. Because even something, I'm trying to remember where I'd seen it at, but one of the other masters had talked about carrying a pen on a plane, and how easy you can use that. Pardon?
I think maybe that sounds like a Master Robinson thing.
Master Robinson, but it was also from Alaska with
Master
Fifth
Wick.
Second.
Master Wick.
Wick, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I was able to do a couple seminars with him when he was in came to Valley Forge, and I took his breakouts, and me and Master Klaus tried to do some of that training together. And it kind of took a whole new aspect on that. And what was really great was I did his seminar at the Master's Clinic, and he emphasized that you approach it like it's an insult to you. How dare you pull a knife on me? That's not your, that's my knife. Yeah, I mean, that was his attitude. And when I did the self-defense, the multiple self-defense you have to do, I just kind of thought, this is fun. Let's have some fun. And then in the knife defense, it was like, oh, this is really going to be fun. And it kind of put me in a different mindset by doing that with him. So that was really great training, an additional add-on with all the various other things that have combined. So over the years, it's sometimes hard to break them apart. Like, what part did this come from? What part did that part come from? So, but I definitely teach that. Now with a sword, take a broomstick. You don't have to have a bokken, because quite frankly, a bokken is pretty heavy to start with. So, but again, being able to use the techniques with a broomstick, keeping your hands apart, okay, and adding the footwork. That's the biggest thing with the sword too, is you can't just swing with your arms with those kind of techniques. I mean, especially Master Setsuyanto. I mean, watching him is phenomenal. I actually trained with the same master I trained in Kung Fu. He also trained with for quite a few years and went more advanced with him with the weapons, then sort of training gumbo as well after that. So he's quite an expert with the sword, and always enjoyed trying to work with him.
Awesome. Well, we're getting at the hour mark. As always, it goes by pretty quick. Is there anything that you wanted to close with, or anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to bring up?
Probably the biggest thing. I mean, well, I told you when I graduated high school in 1978. So I actually turned 61 last week, or earlier this week, actually. And the big thing is I've heard people get to third degree and say, oh, I'm too old to go to fourth degree, or I'm too old to do this. It's like, you do what you do within your limitations. And I talked to someone, oh, I always wanted to do karate, but I'm 40 now. And I look at him, I was like, I didn't start until I was like 35. Okay. So, I mean, you don't need to stop when you get older. You just kind of take the art and make it your own. High kicking is not necessary. Doing some work with actually in Master's Clinic, talking about kicking to the knee. And Master Setsuyanto was doing the form kicking to the knee instead of the high kicks he's so used to. And the balance is different,
Right.
but the effectiveness could be much greater, okay, than on the street trying to kick to the head. So you really need to tailor your training to your capabilities. So, and one thing it's definitely good is the Hapkido, because much of that has nothing to do with your overall physical ability. As long as you can hold somebody's hand and you know the technique, there's very little power involved. Okay. So as you age, staying flexible, staying active, and try to stay within your limits, which I sometimes have trouble with. So as Master Dr. Watson has learned over the years. So, but that's probably the biggest thing to take away is, I mean, I'm 61 and I'm still very active. I'm still doing it. All my children have gone through it. My wife has gone through it, and it's become a family thing for us. So it's probably the most influential thing in my life that has happened.
Awesome.
So,
You may have just coined a new Hapkido phrase, Hapkido, violently holding people's hands. And
yeah, I mean,
so awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us, sir. I had a lot of fun talking to you and learning a little bit more about you. Thank you everyone for joining us. And yeah, Tung Su, sir. Hopefully we'll see you soon so we can train again.
sounds great. Tung Su.
See you guys.
See ya.